Hello, everybody, and welcome to another detailed diatribe where I am joined in person by Red.
Hi, I'm not entirely sure what's gonna happen today. This is a weird one.
I'm not entirely sure how the audio on this one's going to come out. Since
Yeah.
we're not recording separate tracks, my ability to edit around this will be a little bit dicier than usual, so bear with us as today we are talking about the artist Gotye, the album Making Mirrors, and specifically, it's good as fuck. Why it is not just good, but very good, in fact. So the thing about Gotye is a lot of you might have just gotten flashbanged from listening to music in 2012 and seeing basically this image plastered everywhere. Red, did you listen to music in 2012 or watch music videos, or is this completely new to you?
Oh, I was definitely listening to some stuff in 2012. I had just discovered the wonderful world of AMVs.
Yeah.
I had listened to the entire discography of Linkin Park, Evanescence, 3 Days Grace, and, of course, I was exposed to the music video for somebody that I used to know, like everyone else our age.
Yep. Okay, great.
And so, but like a lot of people, I'm only familiar with Gotye from this one song. And he's not a one-hit wonder. I'm sure there's a ton in the shadows about this. I'm gonna be very interested to see where this goes, because we've done a lot of detailed diatribes. We have never done one about an album. There was the One Musical Scene collaboration that we participated in where we talked about Kung Fu Panda music, which was great. But like, this is a very different animal, and this is such an interesting experience for me specifically, because like 3 days ago you were like, I gotta figure out what my next video is gonna be, and then like 2 hours later you're like, I got it, I need you to listen to these songs. I was like, what the fuck? Okay.
Yeah, I was between two possible history makers, and I was like, well, I've been thinking about... Okay, cards on the table. Earlier this year, a song called Anxiety released and blew up on the TikToks and the YouTubes and the Instagram
I
Reels.
saw it on YouTube Shorts, yeah.
And it essentially, from my perspective, reminded everyone, oh, hey, remember somebody that I used to know? That song was tight as f***. Let's go back and listen to that. And then I went back and listened to it and listened to the whole album and had a moment that I'll contextualize a little bit later as we get to it. And I'm like, holy fuck, this is really good. I liked this when I was younger, but oh my god, this is good. And I was deciding whether to do like one History Makers video or another for my next slot, and I thought, let me just write down my thoughts so I don't forget them. And then an hour later, I'm like, uh-oh,
Yep.
I'm in the sauce.
Taking notes is a gateway drug into developing 100% of your thoughts on a detailed diatribe and getting flashbanged by suddenly I have a new idea.
Yes. So, we are talking about Gotye, pronounced like the French name, Jean-Paul Gaultier, the fashion designer. Gautier, not Gautier, as I learned researching this. No, it's okay. He's Flemish-born, raised in Australia. The name in Flemish is spelled Wouter, but I understand that Gautier is basically a Frenchification of this Flemish name. He goes by Wally colloquially. Best known for his chart-topping turbo hit, Somebody That I Used to Know, which, thank God everyone on the call has heard. I was worried for a second, but you got my back. He originally hit it big in Australia with his 2006 song Heart's a Mess. His album Making Mirrors, third studio album under the label Gotye, went mega big internationally, broke containment into the UK and Europe, and then in early 2012, I think it was like late January, it crossed over to the States and then went absolutely massive. In the year 2012, Gotye was absolutely everywhere.
Yeah, there was a stretch of a few years there where there was like one song every few months that would just become the thing that was absolutely omnipresent, because that's when like Gangnam Style was a thing.
Yeah, a little later, but yeah.
Like a different season of every quarter we were in high school, there was something different that was everywhere. And somebody that I used to know was an early one. And it wasn't even because like, oh, the subject matter was resonating with all of us. We were all like 14.
Yeah, we didn't know shit about fuck.
No, yeah. So it was like, oh my god, wow, this is so meaningful, this story of this person who like is experiencing a breakup and doesn't know how to disentangle somebody from their life. And it's like, yeah, okay, I have like fourth period math class, and I've kissed one person. So, but there was something about it that just like hit. And
now you're just somebody that I used to know sees ex-girlfriend in class every day, all the time.
Wow, I can't believe you had your friends collect your records. Yeah, no, it was interesting. I mean, you know, like, it's not like Gangnam Style was popular in our high school because it was resonating with us either. It was just like, damn, what a banger.
I too hang out in the posh neighborhoods of Seoul, South Korea.
I also like sunglasses. Yeah, so.
I pretend to ride a horse all the time.
After that song came out, we sure did.
We sure did. Oh man, when we had like high school dances, when I did the dance for Gangnam Style, I got air doing that dance. I was fucking jumping, man.
Hop, skip, and a jump away.
Yeah, more embarrassing facts about me. Cards on the table. This album was my absolute jam, to the point where it was the first album that I listened to as a unit. Like I loved Linkin Park when I was younger. There were a lot of songs that I was like, this is awesome, but it was like a song here, a song there. This was the first album that I really felt like I listened to on repeat over and over. Like my mom and I and our friends that also really liked Gotye would like make our rankings of all the different songs.
Wow.
And we'd call it like, yeah, no, I really like number 6 is definitely my favorite, and then 5 or 8 depending on the day. Like we called them out by numbers on the album because we were so in it.
Fascinating.
Yeah. We went to a concert of his, and after the concert and the encore, it was like, thanks so much, you guys were ace. And I'm like, what does that mean? I know he meant it as like, you guys are cool. I guess it's like an Australian, New Zealand slang.
Yes.
But now in retrospect, like, what did he know? How did he know?
He clocked you
Gotye,
immediately.
Mr. Tobacco, how the f*** did you find out?
Oh, boy.
Yes, so having won at music, just demolishing all of the charts, he called GG and basically retired. And there's kind of been like a little bit of a cottage industry of what happened to Gotye, how he became a musician that we used to know. Everyone used the same format. It's like, okay, well, you thought about it for 10 seconds. Congratulations.
The low-hanging fruit is there for a reason.
Yeah, we are not engaging in what happens to Gotye today.
This is really funny because, like, first of all, I had no idea you were so deep in the sauce with this album. That's extremely funny.
Yeah.
But the other thing I have to shout out is that you will never pass up an opportunity to make fun of the YouTube thumbnail censor bar over the eyes phenomenon. Like it's truly a weekly occurrence whenever we're chatting. We're like just joking about like, oh my god, they're gonna make a video essay with the black bar over the eyes.
It got worse. We'll just, like, you and I will just say that as like a meme template whenever something bad happens.
The Gotye situation is crazy. I'm not going to name names. Obviously, there's always drama happening somewhere, but I've occasionally seen just like, I'll be like, oh, I wonder what this person's channel mostly does, and I'll scroll through 6 videos of just unflattering shots of the same person with like, it got worse, it's crazy, it's still going, it got worse. It's so funny, and I admire the fact that you're like, no, we're not doing that shit, but we have to acknowledge that we know it's an option.
And unfortunately, a lot of like the YouTube coverage of Gotye is like, what the hell happened to him? And it's like, the nice thing is admittedly like only nice things happens to Gotye afterwards as far as like, public consciousness is aware. He said like on tour for his like 2012 mega tour, like, hey, like this is cool, but it's a lot. I think I like just making music by myself more than this because touring gets in the way of creating, and a lot of touring artists are like, playing music live is the most fun, and for Gotye it was like, it's part of the job. I enjoy it well enough, but like I like just being in my little world creating this by myself. So he retired the Gotye act and went back to making music by himself and his longtime bandmates from the decade prior, the Basics.
He went back to the Basics.
Went back to the Basics, yeah. And he's released albums with them. Afterwards, he had an album in 2019 with them, and I think they had a song last year as well. Also opened up an independent record label for mostly Australia-based independent musicians, which is super cool. We've seen like video game companies do that. Like the guys who made Among Us, Inner Sloth created a publishing label, Outer Sloth, which is very funny. But kind of cultivating that cycle of like, okay, I made it huge. I made, a buttload of money for this. I want to cultivate other people being able to go out and do that. So like super, super cool. And then also because a handful of people said like, hey, your music kind of reminds me of like famous 1900s French experimental electronic artist Jean-Jacques Perry. He was like, huh. So he tracked down an instrument that this artist created called the ondioline. I don't know what it's pronounced like in French. He found a working one and remastered a lot of this guy's music just as a project for fun. Because it's like, yeah, this guy is really cool. I'm going to see if I can find this instrument. And there's like 100 in circulation, maybe, and he got his hands on one. But clearly, it was never about the money or the fame. He never monetized his YouTube channel, even though it made, 2.5 billion views on Somebody That I Used to Know. That's an
Right.
insane amount of potential money on the table, because he doesn't like music being used to push a product, or even being proximate to a product in the form of like ads in front of or behind it. And he willingly parted with 50% of the royalties for Somebody That I Used to Know, because one of the elements of that song was a sample from I believe, Brazilian artist named Luiz Bonfa. His estate basically sued Gotye for 50% of the royalties, and rather than fight it or negotiate it down, he was like, yeah, whatever. Okay, sure. Luis is a great artist. I was thrilled and pleased to use his music. Yeah, sure, go ahead. He clearly does not care about the money and loves music.
That's very generous.
Yes.
Like, because if someone was like, you used one measure of my song,
Kind of,
as
yeah.
10% of your song, so that equals I need 50% of your money. I'd tell them to go pound sand. That's crazy.
Yeah.
He's a better man than I am.
He is a better man than all of us.
Yeah.
Hearing the way he talks about, like, having art next to commercial stuff degrades the art. I'm like, fuck, man. His principles are so clear, and the fame never went to his head, the money or the fame at any point. And he went back to like, cool, I conquered the world, I'm gonna go home and make more music. All the respect in the goddamn world for this man.
There's something really interesting. You know that like sort of like the Crossroads meme where it's like
Yeah.
the shadowy castle versus like the sunny thing. And I feel like for musicians, the getting famous is the crossroads, and like the shadowy castle is like the exact kind of death spiral we've seen over and over again. Oh, hello, Cleo. What a
baby.
rare treat this is for me. And then the other side is like pulling an Enya and like retiring to your castle with 15 cats and like never being seen in public again. Because like it really does feel like fame is a terrifying beast for most artists, frankly speaking. Most artists just want to make art. If you want to get famous, there are easier ways than making art.
Yes.
And so when an artist does get famous, it's like, oh, cool, is this going to impede my ability to make more art? And like that's kind of the question. That's the Crossroads meme. So it's
Bonk.
no, that's going to show up on the waveform.
That's gonna show up on the waveform.
Thanks, Cleo. But yeah, no, I really respect the integrity, and it's pretty fascinating, I must admit.
Yeah. So we're not talking about any of that. Good to just kind of like flag it, but we're rapidly moving on.
Yes.
So his music was very popular. It was good, but why the slideshow? Yes, Somebody That I Used to Know is a bop. Made us all sing along, maybe cry. Yes, the hook is catchy. Yes, the vocals are striking. Yes, guest artist Kimbra killed it in her verse. Yes, the emotional song is full of feelings and it makes you feel emotions. Cool, great, whatever. But the whole album, also the rest of the album, is, in my humble opinion, genius. And I don't think we collectively appreciated when Somebody That I Used to Know was dominating the world and potentially veering on overplayed, depending on how much you liked it and how much you were willing to tolerate hearing it on the radio all the time. I don't think we appreciated that he was, in fact, really that good. And we certainly didn't appreciate what his art and his process specifically can teach us about music.
Yes.
So, at a glance, the album Making Mirrors has Making Mirrors, Easy Way Out, Somebody They Used to Know, Eyes Wide Open, Smoke and Mirrors, a lot of mirrors in here, I Feel Better, In Your Light, State of the Art, Don't Worry, We'll Be Watching You, Giving Me a Chance, Save Me, and Bronte, which is about his dog, and it is very, very sad. I cannot listen to it because I think of Cleo and it makes me cry.
Oh no!
Yeah, so just a couple like call-outs of various things that strike me about the song. Easy Way Out is one of the shorter ones. It's just 2 minutes. It is basically about the monotony of the endless 9-to-5 grind. Yet it is the most aggressive track on the album, and it's super, super fun. Somebody That Used to Know is, of course, a generational masterpiece.
Of course.
Smoke and Mirrors I really like because it's like, what if Imposter Syndrome was a jazzy banger, and you were just kind of like, oh man, such highs and lows, but like, oh, I put on quite a show. Damn.
Well, the only part of that I'll object to is I would not in any way describe it as jazzy. Banger, I'll give you.
It's
Jazz.
got that trumpet. It's like a cabaret. It's got the castanellas or whatever
Call
they're
it
called.
a cabaret banger.
Okay.
Jazzy is something entirely different. To me, jazz means like sax, but what do I know?
Fair enough. Fair enough. He does like his trumpets and horns. Save Me. I just like the harp in this one. We'll talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah.
Are there any songs on the album that particularly stuck out to you, or do you just kind of want to follow the slideshow and we'll see what we see?
Well, I am very excited to see where we're going with this. I listened through it. Here's the thing. My like dark artistic secret is that I keep forgetting that listening to music is an option for filling the space. Like, my object permanence ain't great on a good day, and like the difference between music I can listen to in the background while I work on like writing or art and music that I have to pay 100% attention to, it's huge. You know, like something I can put on in the background while I'm drawing comic, that's great. Something I can put on in the background while I'm writing, that's great. Something that I have to focus on, that's like a commitment. That's concentration. For the same reason that I'm not really much of a podcast person, except participating in them. Listening to music recreationally is a project for me. And this has changed since I got a car, because driving places, having music on in the background is fantastic. So like I've been getting exposed to that. Like, you know, I've listened to the radio now. I get exposed to new songs sometimes. But like, I very much do not listen to music anywhere near as much as pretty much anybody I know. And I'm aware of this. Like, every time we do like a new Rolling with Difficulty campaign and I get assigned having to make a playlist for a character, I'm like, oh, I already used Glitter and Gold the last time. I can't do it again. But what other songs are there? I know this about myself, and I understand it. And the weird thing is I have the tool set to unpack music in interesting ways. In fact, at time of this going up, I don't think the video will be out yet, but I have recently worked on a video specifically about the use of music in broader storytelling. So like, I clearly kind of know what I'm talking about. But there's a little switch in my brain I need to flip that says, am I going to pay attention to this song as an artistic piece of work, or am I just going to let the music happen to me?
Yeah.
And usually I'm just letting the music happen. So, that said, we listened to this album as background music while we were working on an art project together. And it was great. I did notice a few things. I thought it was very interesting how no two of the songs on this album sounded similar.
No. Yes.
I did notice, like, Easy Way Out, not just lyrically, it did somewhat, it had, like, slight Beatles-y vibes. Yeah. And, of course, the Easy Way Out is the refrain of a Beatles song, so, like, that's possibly it. Obviously, somebody that I used to know is doing its own thing, but that specific, like, is it a marimba? Definitely, like, a hammered instrument. Yeah. Didn't really see that anywhere else. I did like Smoke and Mirrors a lot. Of course, part of the other problem is, like, the lyrics of these songs could have been anything. The first time I listened through it, I was like, boy, those sure are sounds happening. But like the second time through, I was like, oh, I'm catching some words. Yeah, I get it. That's usually how it works for me. First time through, I get the melody. Second time through, I get about half the lyrics, and then it's kind of a Zeno's paradox every subsequent listen.
Yeah, audio processing, I never get lyrics on a first pass of a song.
I did like I Feel Better. It was kind of funny how it was like, there's a bit of a narrative where it's like, wow, you know, my relationship ended and that's complicated. And that's like, wow, my new relationship is awesome. And then, wow, my new relationship is really good. And then, wow, I sure do love this synthesizer. And then the next one's like, man, my relationship is sure nice. And it's just, I don't know, it's funny. I know a lot of albums try to tell a story, especially things like concept albums will be like one to the other, like we're telling some kind of extremely complicated rock opera situation, whereas this one definitely felt a little bit more like, here's a bunch of things that are happening. Here's some thoughts that drift through my head on an average day.
Yeah. That is admittedly one of the ways that he kind of defined or described the concept of the album was like, it's, you know, sound waves between sheets of glass, and sometimes it feels like I can reflect ideas off of them like mirrors there. Ta-da. Album name drop, there you go.
Yeah.
There are some interesting intricacies in the way the songs kind of flow together, because the end of Easy Way Out, the last like 3 or 4 notes lead into, it's basically kind of a 3-note descent, and then the logical ending of that sequence of notes is the switch over to the first note of somebody that I used to know. So there is some really interesting little bits of kind of crossover, and like an idea planted in Don't Worry, We'll Be Watching You comes back at the end of Giving Me a Chance as a little lead into Save Me. So there are some interesting little things going on.
Yeah.
And it is part of the reason of why I found it so interesting listening to this as a whole album when I was younger. But it is also the kind of stuff you really only get if you listen to it over and over and over and over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah. I do think it's interesting. Obviously, what makes a song go viral is something that people have been trying to crack for ages, because virality is money and fame, and for a lot of people, that's a very important driving force. And listening through the album, the only one of these songs that I could call up the lyrics and sing along to would be somebody that I used to know.
Yeah.
And I really do think that is generally the limiting factor on virality, is like how accessible is it to sing along with? Obviously, the musical theater nerds are out in force online. They love that shit. But the musical theater numbers that get big are the ones that have pretty accessible melody lines. They're kind of in the middle range that a lot of people can access. They aren't the ones where you show off by belting. The musical theater nerds will love doing Defying Gravity, but most people are going to be singing Popular, you know? Like, one of those has a much simpler melody line.
Yeah, there's an interesting interview from Charlie Puth somewhere where he's like, yeah, I rewrote, I think it might have been the chorus of Attention, to make it easier for other people to sing, because he has his ridiculous range and can sing nearly anything, and it's like, cool, if I'm the only one who can sing this, that's a problem.
Yeah, Attention is just climbing up and down the scale, especially in the chorus. And I was thinking about this just recently because K-Pop Demon Hunters just came out like a month or two ago, and all of the songs charted, which was awesome. And the thing that I noticed is like,
keeping you obsessed.
Yeah.
Because they're on the charts.
Yes, exactly. I guess they really are our idol. But the thing that I thought was interesting about that is that there are points where you can vocally show off, especially in Golden. That's like the whole point.
Yeah.
There's a bit where you're sort of climbing the scale.
Not in the first act.
Well, but like the point is there's a few points where you get really impressive, but all of the choruses are very singable.
Yeah.
They are very do the challenge coded. You know, you could sing along even if you're not, you know, necessarily a super trained singer. And that's the part that I think helps get it stuck in people's heads and makes them want to listen to it over and over again, because we treat
Play Me on Repeat could have C in your head.
Okay, all right.
Anytime it hurts.
Look, and once again, nobody more obsessed than a convert. Because I sent you your idol in isolation, and you were like, "Oh, this bangs." And you're like, "I'm going to watch the entire movie now."
It's like, I think I sent you, oh no.
Unfortunately, this rules. But yeah, there's just a lot of really interesting conversations to be had there. But a lot of this is like, this to me qualifies as good background music because the lyrics are not super forward. Like, they're happening, but they're kind of easy to tune out, which is a strange thing to think about. Whereas with Somebody That I Used to Know, the vocals are front and center. It is all about that. And it's about the narrative. It's about the duet. And I think that's why it got so viral in a way that basically nothing else on the album seems to have, simply because you can sing that shit easy.
Yeah.
And you can also understand it on the first listen.
Yes.
And I don't know, this feels like a tangent, but it always is interesting to me whenever we talk about something that went viral, because the question is always like, what was so special about this? What made this go crazy where everything else was more chill? And a lot of these are very nice. I don't think there was a single song on the album where I was like, this isn't working for me. They were all interesting. I liked that they were all different from one another, but it was definitely like, yeah, these are all good, but no two of them sound the same, and nothing else on this album sounds like Somebody That I Used to Know.
Yeah.
And that kind of makes sense why Somebody That I Used to Know is the one that went everywhere and is still everywhere, like 13 years later.
Yeah. So, despite the vast differences in kind of composition and tone, there are some commonalities across the album. Thank you for your excellent segue, Red. One of them is unique instrumentation. Whether it is real instruments or ridiculous synth combos, it is always used to create a very strong texture that is unique to each track. It is, all of them do it, and that's why all of them sound different.
Right.
There's also, in some places, very clever contrasts between lyrics and the musical tone, especially for Easy Way Out, which is about frustration of tedium, and it gets this very punchy, quick, aggressive track. Smoke and Mirrors is mountainous self-doubt, and it has this kind of I guess not jazzy. I won't try to push it.
Jazzy. It's just that's not what comes to mind when I think jazzy.
Yeah, fair enough. But it's got this like cabaret belter kind of action to it that feels very, very smooth, like a glass of something alcoholic that I don't drink. And then also the willingness to take his goddamn time, building up the songs layer by layer, so you get to hear each element in the mix as it gets layered in, and then it also feels richer than if you are just dropped into the song with everything on, an equal volume in the mix, because you're like, oh, here is, the bass line, here is the drums, here is the fun, wacky overlayer of instrumentation with like a crazy auto harp that gets put in, and then, okay, cool, we get some kind of like vocal backing, and then bingo, into the verse. There's a lot of time taken on that, and I did some math comparing the Billboard Top 10 US charts for 2012. Second place that year was Call Me Maybe.
Wow.
Somebody That I Used to Know is on average, or is 30 seconds longer than the average of all of those songs. They were in the low threes. Somebody they used to know is just over 4 minutes. Also, the average length of these introductions as he's layering everything in is about 30 seconds. The longest one is like 1:05, but compared to the rest of pop music, the intros are 15 seconds or less. In the 80s, they were kind of in like the 20 to 30 range, and nowadays they can be as low as an average of, from the source that I saw, in 2017, the average intro to a song was 5 seconds, which is... In the age of trying to chase virality, you have to get to the point as fast as humanly possible, which is why it's insane that Somebody That I Used to Know was the #1 song in 2012, because it has basically the longest intro of any of those songs on the Billboard Top 10. And part of the reason that it's so good, and Gotye called this out in interviews, of like, it's kind of antithetical to the way that you create a viral song, because it is very slow in getting to the first verse, and then there are 2 verses before you get the first chorus at about 2 minutes in. So he's really willing to be patient and let it build and build and build. So when there's that release, it feels like it's actually earned, versus 5-second intro, quick verse, chorus, verse again, the bridge, chorus, and then gone, so you can just put it on loop forever and get the streams up on Spotify.
It's always so fascinating to me when in a conversation about what makes something popular, all these rules are laid out about like, here's what you have to do. And currently it's like, you need their attention so early. They can't, if they scroll away, you've lost them forever.
Yeah.
And then all these examples of these incredibly well-known, like, things that did go viral, get famous, you know, become part of, like, the cultural zeitgeist, and they don't follow any of those rules. And it's like, guys, maybe the rules are bullshit. Maybe the rules don't work.
Yeah.
And it's just, I don't know, like, any given art piece that gets really popular, it's usually because it's got something that appeals. And one thing I really like about Somebody That I Used to Know is that it sort of eases you into figuring out what the hell's going on. It's weird to think about it this way, but it's a storytelling convention. The idea that when you start a story, you have no idea really what you're getting into. You might know the genre, you might have the general back blurb, but you don't really know what's going to happen. And then the first few words of it sort of start cueing you in, of like, here's the vibe we're dealing with. And with Somebody That I Used to Know, it's like, this person is reminiscing about somebody who used to be important in their life. Okay, interesting. And then you think you're in that story, and it goes about the way you expect it to. Like, yeah, you know, crazy. Wow, it's crazy that, like, we're not together anymore. And then Kimbra's verse comes in, and it's like, you know, I also think about that time, and it sucked pretty bad. Like, we broke up for a reason. So you get enough of the story to have expectations, and then they can be subverted with that verse.
Yeah.
You can't get that if you're speeding to the point.
No.
If you're afraid that your audience isn't going to understand what you're going for, you can't take any risks on slowly parceling out information. And that's one of the things that I see in a lot of forms of storytelling, not really in music most of the time, because I think music that tells a story is always kind of in the minority of what's the current popular song.
Yeah.
Admittedly, a lot of them are telling very similar stories to one another. And frankly, damn, it's crazy that we broke up is a pretty common story. Like that one's not, you know, breaking any new ground. But
Adele is like, write that down.
Adele and Taylor Swift are both like jockeying for position over like which one gets the next breakup. But it's just, it is interesting to me that there's a degree of trust on the part of the audience to listen for the required 30 seconds to get to the part where the words start, and then understand what he's putting down. And, like, it's not that complicated, obviously. The song is pretty simple. Everybody gets it. Everybody likes it. But there's still trust there. And if he was going on the design principles of, if they click away, you failed as a creator.
Yeah.
Like, no. Any art exists for an audience that will understand it. And you have to make art for the audience that will engage with it in good faith. You cannot be making art to try and snag the most eyeballs as possible, because that will get you a lot of eyeballs of people who aren't interested in your art, aren't interested in, you know, engaging with your art, or like taking the time to give it the consideration it deserves. Like, you cannot write for the people who don't care about your work. You have to write for the people who do care about your work.
Yeah.
And so Gotye takes his time and comes up with a song that even the people who don't, like, give a shit about the message will be like, sounds nice, sung good, vocals nice, good job. And then the people who are in the sauce, as somebody on this call is, can just get...
It could be anyone. We're all trying to find the guy who wrote the slideshow.
Yeah, would just, like, absolutely steep themselves in it and be like, wow, this really does work for me on every level. And if Gotye had sacrificed some of his artistic vision to try and get the clicks before they scroll away, like 30 seconds, that's half of the old short's time limit. That's a bonkers time commitment. But if you're not writing a song for TikTok virality, and frankly, nobody should be doing that. No. I saw like a statistic where it's like modern pop songs, like the good bit will be 1.5 minutes long because they know that is all the time they need. And it's like, yeah, maybe, but like, maybe don't do that. Maybe more song good.
Yeah.
I think the 80s rock songs had the best idea where they don't have an ending for the song. They just kind of crank the volume down.
Yeah.
The band slowly moves away from the microphone. Yeah. But
loop this as long as you want.
But yeah, no. In short, Gotye's willingness to take his time, I think, is just indicative of his general design principles as an artist, and they are ones that I agree with. I think it is important to be able to give art the time it needs and not rush out of fear that you're going to lose people, because people are willing to be patient for things they know they'll like.
Absolutely. And one of the aspects of not just the way the album is constructed, but his process that he uses is sampling, which is, if you're not terribly familiar with music, you might hear of like, oh, sampling is when you take someone else's song and then make a little bit of music on top of it. Where it's like, I'm going to use the entire bass line and melody from this other song and then slightly change the words, and then it's mine now.
Does anyone think that's how sampling works? I'd believe it. I was just always under the impression that sampling was like, I'm going to take like one measure of this and throw it in there, and then the rest of it's going to be me talking over the top or something.
That is how it should be.
Okay.
Some people get a little bit generous with how much they sample.
Fascinating.
Of course, anytime I try to be like, the general audience obviously thinks this, I'm stepping into a minefield.
You dumb f***s at home might think this is true, but it's actually not, and I am smart and good at stuff.
Yeah, at its worst, sampling is a very generous, like, I'm just going to scrape this whole thing.
There's a very complicated space, and I will say, I've got a friend who's been very interested in, like, music copyright and trademark law, because there's so much weird shit there.
Yeah.
Like, people will try and be like, that's my chord progression. And sometimes it's like, okay, that does sound very similar. But sometimes it's like, you can't have the 4 chords of pop. Those are for everyone.
Here's maybe a better example. There's the Daft Punk song, Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger.
Yep.
And then Kanye made a version of it that uses the same underlying melody and texture, and he, rapped over it and changed it around a little bit.
Right.
But it's still very much like you can see the direct lineage of one song to another.
Right.
That, I guess, is the most, generous read of what you can do with sampling.
Yeah.
So let me rein it in a little bit and talk about how Gotye uses it specifically. He will go to the op shop, kind of secondhand store, trawl around through bins of vinyls and try to find interesting sounds, interesting instruments, clusters of notes. Like if you've seen the clip, the Jimmy Fallon show where Charlie Puth basically hits a mug with a spoon and then puts it into a synthesizer and pitches it down and then turns it into like the bass for a song and then pitches it up and turns into the melody.
Wow.
It's like, his song Light Switch uses a light switch like pitched up and down and then turned into an instrument. So like that kind of thing of taking sounds that are more than just I'm playing a guitar or more than just I'm using this automatic computer plugin.
Right.
Taking interesting sounds from the music that he's found in the world and remixing it, reorchestrating it, repitching it, rearranging it into new things. So for instance, this is a artist named Francis Yip, mostly Hong Kong, kind of Taiwanese music. And he took, for the intro to State of the Art, the first 5 notes of one of her songs for trumpet, and it, her phrase goes in different directions.
Right.
He takes those first few notes, rearranges them, so it's still that same sound off of that vinyl recording, but he does something very different with it. So a lot of his process is taking elements or clusters of notes or just a single interesting sound and using that as his building blocks rather than starting from the basis of I'm going to play this on guitar. And that is a lot of his process for previous music, and he wanted to do that for about half of his music on Making Mirrors, whereas the other half is using samples built from real instruments, which is really wacky. So in his YouTube documentary, Making Mirrors, a 10-minute little thing, kind of talking about his process, he shows plucking single notes on an auto harp, like a lap harp, individual things, saving them as single notes, and then he basically puts that into a synthesizer on keyboard so he can play it faster than a human can pluck it, but more like individually than you can strum it, because you can strum it and play it fast, sure,
course, yeah.
but he gets this really interesting sound that you cannot physically create with human hands on an auto harp by turning it into a sample machine. So he does this with a handful of other instruments. This is just the example that he showed very cleanly for us on his YouTube channel. And it is the same core idea of getting texture from interesting places and recomposing it into his music. But the result is, once again, a really wacky and interesting sound that no one else has.
That definitely explains why every song sounds so different from every other song.
Yeah.
If they're all essentially built out of like a different sample or sound that he was getting inspired by at the time. That's very cool and makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And finally, the sauce, believe it or not, is still in the sampling. The third pillar of this is that Gotye adores retro synthesizers. He has a personal collection of these old-timey machines from 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s that use various analog or kind of early digital wizardry to produce their unique sounds that is very different from the kind of like laptop-based plugins of like, I'm going to get the basic 808 drum, synthesizer pack and just use the same thing that everybody else is using. It's instruments that a lot of people, I guess synthesizer is an instrument, that a lot of people simply don't use anymore because it's like, oh, we have this new stuff that's so much easier. But Gotye really likes tinkering with this kind of stuff, mechanically playing with these instruments, but also using the sounds he gets out of them and then playing around and tinkering with those as the building blocks. So there is pulling things off of records and then sampling that, sampling instruments to create his own new sounds, and then sampling stuff that he finds off of these, old-timey analog and in some cases early digital synthesizers to get the kind of shit that basically no one else is looking for. There's an interesting video here of basically this guy with the YouTube channel going to Gotye's place to just kind of like f around with this old-timey like French synthesizer and just like see what kind of sounds we can find.
I was gonna say it was pretty cool of him to collaborate with Tony Stark on this one, because that really does speak to his credentials as an inventor. But yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of like weird shit from like space age sci-fi, playing around with different ways that electronics could make noise. There are those musicians that play Tesla coils. There's theremins, where it's just like, we figured out a way to use your body's electromagnetic field to interface with this thing. Have fun! You look like a wizard when you do it.
Yeah.
There is a degree to which modern musical composition has been made far easier simply by the fact that, like, there are sound packs that you can just get. You can do. You can have a whole music career just making a garage band, which is great. That's extremely cool how accessible it is. But it is always fun to sort of go back to the roots and be like, but how weird can we make this? I've seen some absolutely heinous, like, homebrewed electric guitars that people have made with really weird sounds, and it's cool. It's very rad. Like, obviously back in the Wild West days of musical synthesizing, things were a little bit weirder across the board, and the things that were the easiest and most accessible would definitely be the ones that got the most popular. But it's always good to go back to basics and see how weird you can get at the source, and it's very cool that Gotye just does that.
Yeah, not to speak for all musicians, but it is one school of composing songs is like, I'm going to start from the chord progression, or like I'm going to start from the melody. It is not universal, but from the interviews I've seen of Gotye talking about his process, a lot of it is like, I find a sound that I like, and then I build off of that. I see what pairs with it, and eventually I find I have most of a song right there. So it's a kind of like interesting inverse from a lot of the typical ways that we think, as viewers or as listeners, that music composition happens. Obviously, there are a lot of people who compose in a ton of different ways, not to generalize, but he is very much in this one zone of like, I'm gonna find the sounds and work from that, rather than like, okay, I have an idea for this song, let me see if I can find something for it. And again, not universal, but it's more of the trend of how he works from it, and in being that kind of tinkerer archetype in music.
Yeah.
And on the subject of synthesizers, behold the big guns, the Lowry Cotillion Model D575. Gotye's parents got a used one for him for about $100, whereas back in the day they retailed for about 15,000 new.
Oof.
Espensivo.
Yeah.
And it was like, it was a little beat up, but like I could still play it. It still worked fine. And he was obsessed with the way that it could produce a ton of unique sounds at high fidelity, even though it was a digital synth. It had an analog type quality that he really liked. And again, even compared to the contemporary synths that we have 50 years later, this produces a very distinct sound that you just cannot find on your average, off-the-shelf computer program. And he had it in his head that, oh, I would love to make a song almost entirely from this instrument, if only I could. And from that we get the swerve, which is making a song with the Cotillion about the Cotillion, and thus we arrive at the 8th track on Making Mirrors, which is state of the art.
Yep.
And not to front load the take too much, but Gotye really likes this song. In 3 different interviews, he said this is basically his favorite one on the track, insofar as he has one.
Right.
State of the Art is one of my favorites on the recent record. It features a whole bunch of Cotillion sounds. I like State of the Art, and Bronte Sometimes Save Me as my favorite. And a longer quote that I want to read out because I find it quite interesting.
Sure.
One of my favorites is State of the Art, which I think probably will divide a lot of listeners, especially the wider audience who have discovered my music through a song like Somebody That I Used to Know. I get the feeling that a song like State of the Art confounds some of those people, whereas others really take to its peculiarity. I would love to see a song like State of the Art be a hit single, because I think it's quite catchy, and it's written like a pop song for me. But in that way, I'd like to see more pop music be. Very idiosyncratic, kind of strange, and requiring a little bit of understanding about what the hell the concept behind this is. You were talking about exactly this earlier. Yeah, those are the kinds of things I think are strongest about it, but they're also the things that can turn a lot of people off, apart from maybe the vocoder talkbox voice on it, which we'll talk about in a second. But I like the way he's kind of spelling it out for me exactly to use in this thesis, because it's like, yeah, I like this song a lot. It's weird as fuck, and I wish more songs could be like this.
Something just clicked for me, which I think is really funny, because when you had me listen to this, I was like, is this really about government bad surveillance state or something? And you're like, no, it's really about how cool this synthesizer is. I was like, that's allowed? And that's the thing. There are a lot of songs that are about stuff, obviously. But I feel like it's not controversial to say that a lot of songs can be sorted into various buckets. It's like, is this about a romance you're having, or did have once? Is this about your self-loathing issues and perhaps a drug problem, maybe? Is this about government bad? And anything else? Oh, or is it a funny haha comedy song? Like the works of Tom Lehrer and Bo Burnham, they have stories, but they're goofy stories. But then I'll be like, wow, this song is so Naruto Sasuke. And then it's this is about a breakup or a drug problem. And I'm like, okay, cool. Those are the 2 genders. So the idea that a song can truly...
Starscream is just like me for real.
But no, I mean, look, I was in the AMV trenches back in the early 2010s. I know whereof I speak. You can take a song that has all these lyrics that are vague enough, because they're just about something. And it's oh, this is about the character being sad. And it's maybe it's because they've lost somebody. Maybe it's because somebody they love died. Maybe it's because somebody broke up with them. Maybe it's because they're disappointed in themselves. But the vibes of that are vague enough that you can slap that over any number of anime fight scenes and call it a day. It's great. But sometimes you get a song that's truly about something, and usually those are specific. You get you get political anthems, you get various self-loathing journeys, you get character studies, Jolene, that kind of thing.
Yes.
But it's kind of rare to get a song that's not in one of those sort of vague boxes, and I really do think it's because, for the sake of virality, you want people to be like, wow, it's just like me, FR. And then this one being about a fucking 50-year-old synthesizer, that's weird. That's weird. I like it a lot.
It's weird as hell.
It's just, I feel so silly now, because I'm so used to being take art on its own merits, and the song is I'm about a synthesizer, and I'm like, yeah, but what are you really about? Is this drugs, is this breakup, or is this a secret third thing? They're like, no, it's about how much fun I'm having playing with this toy.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We will explore how it gets to a secret third thing, still within the realm of check out this cool fucking piano that I found. But yeah, I love when music is ridiculously, impossibly specific about a feeling. That's when I'm like, yes, give me more. I don't want to be like, Gotye agrees with me, guys, but there is clearly a reason he finds this song interesting. There's something about it that speaks to him to be calling it out so much in these different interviews. So what is it about this song that does that? And I'm going to be basically placing some lyrics from the song in some of the little headlines for these slides. So let's crack open why we have to hold the phone, because this is so state-of-the-art. The horn bass layer sampled from Francis Yip, which I mentioned earlier, and rearranged. And he thought, okay, after that, what do I want to pair that with? Okay, I have this Turkish drum that I've been playing around with. I think this will be a really nice counterpoint to that. And again, a very slow, layer-by-layer introduction of the various elements. First the horn, then the Turkish drum, then some more of these cotillion sounds until we eventually get into the verse. It's a 45-second introduction, which is the second longest on the entire record. A thing we'll get to in a bit when we talk about the music video.
Yeah.
The scene itself is being built, to the rhythm, layer by layer. First, the walls of the house, and then the furniture and the family, and stuff going on. So we see this purposeful construction of the space we're going to be playing in, whether that is the physical space of the house in the music video, or the kind of sonic space of the song getting to the first verse. He does a very fun and funky vocoder effect to get this sort of robotic quality to his voice, and he has this on the Making Mirrors documentary. He sang the whole song in monotone and then did a program to basically pitch it to the notes that he wants.
When the cotillion arrived,
I sang the whole thing in a monotone,
we threw out the television.
and then electronically shifted each note to make the melody.
Was custom flute presets and harmony plus in addition.
Which means the further away he gets from that monotone note he was singing, the more f***ed up and distorted the effect gets. So there's a kind of fun, it's not a uniform distortion, it's kind of bouncing around, pulling a rubber band a little bit as he wavers more from that, original middle note he was singing. A complicated way to do that, but that little extra bit of texture brings something if you're listening for it. And then, of course, an absolute ton of different sounds from the cotillion.
Yep. This does make a lot of sense, because the thing we've just discussed is his design philosophy is very experimental, and it's clear that he's not I need this to be a success, I need this to be a hit, I need to figure out how to appeal to my audience best. He's clearly, he comes up with a new idea, and then he plays around to see if it'll work. Autotune tech has been around for ages, but sing the song in monotone, and then intentionally distort it up and down to produce that weird effect. Yeah, I mean, if your goal is not to sound like you're just hitting every note perfectly, then you can get as funky with it as you want, and I think that's really interesting.
Looking at the the things we've talked about so far, textures, layering, patience, contrast, or in this case, supreme alignment on a theme, and then sampling, gang's all here. Yeah. So, as we get into the actual, what's going on in this song, what are we talking about here? It is sung from the point of view of a family that just got their own cotillion in this kind of Jetsons futuristic kind of retro tech world. Yeah. And they are gushing about all of the amazing features and how it has completely changed their life. And the song goes into pretty, specific itemized depth of listing out all of these different things. The custom flute presets, harmony plus, 3 half-dozen beats to choose from. The Genie bass, which Gotye said in an interview is such a fun name to have for a program. A 16-foot diapason, I don't know what the f*** that is. Lowry's patented orchestral symphonizer, a banjo, which can play in a very interesting way, because if you just turn a knob on how fast it goes, it can play faster than any human can do. Classic. So we'll get to it in a second, but it sounds nothing like a banjo, but it's a fun song. It has a bossa nova mode, apparently, and a magical swing piano. All of these different insane features, and the song is look at how cool this is. This is amazing. It's a home entertainment revelation. And they're just enthralled with the power of this machine that can do everything they need.
It is so funny to me that Gotye was I don't like it when music is worked into advertising. I don't want to monetize my YouTube channel. Let me just incorporate sound bites of what sounds like an at-the-time television ad. Did I predict the future?
Yes, 2 slides ahead.
Yep.
Yes.
So it's very funny to me, because yes, obviously this song is telling a story about this cool product, it's not advertising, and nobody in the world is probably making these things anymore. It's just very funny to me.
Cotillion does actually still, or Lowry still does exist.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can we go back to the previous slide? Because the other thing I wanted to highlight is Lowry's patented orchestral symphonizer is the most, like, 1930s newsreel bullshit I've
Yes.
ever. Lowry's patented orchestral symphonizer.
Yes,
Are
exactly.
you kidding me with this?
Like, you can hear the TM
You
in the lyrics.
You can hear the extreme crunchy newsreel sound effect.
Yeah. The voices that play in this song, there's this tiny interspersed commentary of this guy like it's a computer revelation. Pairing music with computers is quite natural. Listen to the difference, and like all these different little advertiser ass insertions that Gotye makes into the song, including at the very end when the music stops and he's like, now despite all of what you just heard, there were no keyboard performances, only the occasional pushing of buttons. Like this is all just by the computer. No real instruments were used. It's such a fun, and like every once in a while, you know, in the dubstep days, you'd have like a random cutaway to someone from the 40s just talking about shit. Skrillex did this all the time, and I always found it obnoxious.
Yeah.
This is the one song where I'm like, this absolutely fits the Jetsons' ass mid-century retro tone.
I'll make an exception because he looks very polite. Also, I gotta say, when you were like, you gotta watch the music video for this, I was like, sure, and I loaded it up and I was like, this is the most Gendy Tartakovsky ass.
Yes.
So now I know why you're obsessed with this.
Yeah, no, exactly. Some more commentary on why Gotye clearly adores this machine and was having so fun with it. Example of the banjo I mentioned a second ago. The banjo sound is hilariously pokey, almost like a gated 8-bit chip blip, but you can control it in other patches with the orchestral symphonizer section with a repeat function. Push the repeat button in, and the staccato banjo note plays over and over and over again. Drag the repeat knob from left to right, and the speed of the repetition increases until it reaches a pace no human banjo player could ever match. In short, it sounds nothing like a banjo, but it's a totally sweet sound in its own right. This is such a fun little description of why he loves the wacky bullshit this instrument can do. Now, we talked about like, oh, there's no secret third thing, but we kind of construct a little bit of a secret third thing through the lens of the Cotillion, because Gotye has said on various interviews, like, I was really interested by the home music culture of like this period of time that now is kind of gone, but it was a very distinct world from pop, which was very kind of commercial and on the radio and out and about. You would hear it in the world, and classical, which is very like you go to a separate place and you all sit down and you listen to it there. This was a culture of music in the home that was separate from both of those and had its own idiosyncrasies and quirks and benefits and drawbacks about it. Mm-hmm. At the time that this thing came out, this home organ was the cutting edge of what music and technology could do together. Yet now looking at it, he describes it as almost hokey, a bygone era of music. And this song with the, robotic vocoder voice in his description kind of captures a vision of what this technology might have felt like at the time, and in my interpretation extrapolates it to infinity for a kind of sci-fi vision that retains the Cotillion as the pinnacle of music. And I compare this to the Those Dang Phones video, where visions of the future are always grounded in the technology of today. So it's like, in the retro-futuristic world of the 70s and 80s, what is the most insane music we can picture in the future, but it's still grounded in that particular moment.
Yeah, that's the thing. The retro-futuristic aesthetic is always such a weird, fascinating little like time capsule, because it's so indicative of the moment in time that it was conceived of. What did those guys think the future was going to look like? And that's, of course, why historical visions of the future have varied wildly from one another. Right now, we're sort of in the touch screen and glass era. So, you can just, aesthetically compare the way the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies look to the way that original Star Trek looks. Original Star Trek is, buttons, flashing lights, little handheld communication devices. That's crazy. And now it's, touchscreens, holograms, lens flares. Everything looks like the inside of an Apple store. Because that's our current vision of the future. The chrome. It's polished. It's glass.
Yeah. Original trilogy to Star Wars Episode 1. Huge jump towards chrominess.
Exactly. Yeah. There was a time where the future was smooth curves in weird places, the Fantastic Four movie just came out, and it has a very retro-futuristic aesthetic. They very carefully crafted it, so everything looks like the hottest car of 1972, that kind of thing. Everything's got that weird sort of top-heavy wedge shape.
More 50s, but yeah.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
No, it's okay.
History is all the same to me. But yeah, no, I it's just such a specific thing. It just really tickles that little part of your brain, because we We know that aesthetic. We know what it means. It's nothing like the world we actually live in.
Yeah. Like, looking at the Cotillion itself, like, it looks kind of quaint, but this was a spaceship.
Yep.
In 1981, this was a spaceship.
Yeah, in 1981, clean wood grain was the technology of a future fancy device. Because, like, that's the thing. This is still, like, that's a centerpiece in the room it's in. That's not, that's like having a home piano. It's not there because you really like playing the piano and you need a good piano. It's there because it's a display piece as well as, a musical toy, as it were.
It's instrument and sculpture.
Exactly,
Yeah.
which means it looks real fancy. Whereas, like, modern synthesizers, modern music making stuff, it's like those incomprehensible giant, like, boards of just, like, dials and switches and shit. Because, like, you see them in recording studios and almost nowhere else. The idea that you would make this as a display piece, and as a display piece, that means polished wood, because polished wood it signifies furniture. Nice furniture, even. The idea that this is simultaneously a musical instrument and nice furniture, not really a thing these days.
No.
Not so much, at least. Not in the synth department.
Yeah. It's a very interesting intersection of a particular era of music technology, and then let's just ramp that up to space age. And that's part of why it sounds and conceptually feels like nothing else. No one else is making music about the fucking Cotillion. As we get through the song, we're talking about how amazing it is, all these different features. The wonderment of the Cotillion takes on a little bit of an edge in the final verse, as they say, now we don't want to go out when we can spend the night at home with the Cotillion, invite the neighbors around, start the bossa nova beat in limbo from the living to the kitchen, enjoy the state of the art, the magic swing piano really is astounding, and we can't tell them apart, but these amazing simulations end up sounding even better than the real thing in the final chorus and, blammo, final instrumental explosion. The excitement of making music together as a family turns into something that is ultimately isolating from all other music and the outside world. They don't go out, they invite their neighbors in, and they're still social, but there's this kind of interesting kind of construct around it of, like, we aren't leaving the Cotillion. We're not gonna go anywhere else because we're having too much fun here. And it is a collective activity, but there's a little bit of an edge to it. And that's very interesting. He doesn't come down on, like, this is why home music culture was bad. He lets there be this space, this ambiguity, but he does give an opportunity for, like, as much as I love this sick-ass piano, there is something distinct about what this can do to someone if they spend too much time playing the Cotillion at home.
Case in point, gestures to himself. But no, that is the line that jumped out at me and was like, is this about the government or something? I mean, like, the thing is, if there is a message in here that isn't just, man, this Cotillion's sick as fuck, I love all its many features, it seems like anytime a story is like, wow, this virtual reality is so much better and more painless than the real world, that's usually bad.
Yeah.
It's usually like, escapism, no good. And I will say that the music video takes that concept, cranks that sucker up to 11.
Yeah.
Which was, I'll admit, a bit of a surprise, because I listened to the music first. I was like, wow, yeah, nice song, like, very synthy, I like it. And then I watched the music video, I was like, oh, we're doing something very different with this.
They go in a very different direction. Gotye worked with an Australian animation studio, now disbanded, called Rubber Hose Studios, to produce a kind of Gendy Tartakovsky-looking video about this Jetsons family getting a Cotillion, which then becomes sentient, turns evil, destroys their house, flies into space, lands on Mars, and transforms the family into robots.
Yeah.
It is far more sinister than the song, where there's, like, this tiny little edge in the end of the song. If you're just listening to it, this is like, yeah, we're gonna extrapolate that to infinity. And there's a much different implied message about the march of technology, almost like bordering on fear-mongering of, like, if you play the electric piano too much at home, you'll lose your humanity and turn into a robot.
Very Black Mirror.
Yes, but also what I find fascinating about listening to this music now is that this is a decade before the algorithmic hypnosis trap that is the modern internet, and the anxieties about, what if a Cotillion, like, stole your mind and then, like, turned you into a robot and flung you out to Mars? Like, okay, obviously not, but what if a technology that was designed for entertainment turned you into something less than human and hypnotized you into just being a strolling zombie. He could not have spoken to that because obviously that world wasn't really even conceptual yet. We were still in the early days of like Twitter's fun and new and cool.
I love being able to talk to everybody I know on the internet.
Yeah.
And who has more friends is a signal of how popular you are, because Facebook is full of real human beings. And they definitely all know what a real headline is.
Yeah. And Gotye is no stranger to making potentially apocalyptic proclamations. His song Eyes Wide Open is full-on climate apocalypse disaster. This is not quite as much as that. But in the music video, there is this question of like, what do we do with this home entertainment technology? How perfect of a source of infinite music is too perfect? If it is a genuine home entertainment revelation, does that do anything bad, maybe? And again, I don't think he's coming down on any particular statement one way or the other. And in fact, there is a very wide possibility space between, you know, on the one hand, the Cotillion slaps, this is awesome, and oh no, my new piano's gonna turn me into a machine. Very wide range of interpretations here, but Gotye was involved with Rubber Hose Studios in conceiving of the direction for this music video, so he had a hand in this, and he was like, this is fun, let's go for this. And he's not averse to having a music video for a song kind of go in a different direction than the song itself and let them exist in kind of a range, a span between them. But I think there is a lot of analysis that can be gleaned from not just looking at the music video, not just looking at the song, but figuring out how we feel about how they work together. And I think that's really cool. And it's part of what I like analytically about this, in addition to just the musically itself. Our trusty transatlantic infomercial announcer tees up the final explosion of Cotillion sounds. It's time to hear the result after the last chorus, and it's just bam, in Dan Avidan's words, ooh, that is tasty. There is, to me, something about the way that he mixes his music that just hits extra hard on that last chorus. But I think there is also, in talking about the possibility space between the music video and the song, there is, once again, a possibility space of interpretations between Gotye saying, hey, check out this cool-ass piano, and meaning one very specific set of things, and the characters saying, yo, check out this cool-ass piano, and meaning a different set of things. There is a nice synchronicity, but they are not talking about the exact same thing in the exact same way. And Gotye finds the Cotillion cool for different reasons than the people in song find it cool. And I think that opportunity for the listener to make their own set of analyses and takeaways is one of the things that he does best in his songs that are a little more abstract. Some of them are obviously pretty straightforward, but some of them do allow for interpretation and variety. And even going to something as simple as Somebody That I Used to Know, which is a very simple song, there are literally two sung perspectives that allow the listener two different anchor points or two different lenses to take on this breakup argument they're happening. So it's good. It's good writing. It's good music video making. It's good as f***. I love this song.
I do think it's really interesting because a lot of the time, both writers and audiences, I think, can sometimes sort of fall into this where it's like, what is the story trying to convince me is right? Because, like, you know, a writer might be like, oh, I have like I want to tell a story that like guides people. I want to tell people like how I think is the right way to live. And sometimes an audience is like, is this story trying to make me think something? What is it trying to make me think? And sometimes this can translate into a sort of analysis where the audience ends up maybe assuming, oh, because the writer put this in the story, they must think it's cool and based actually. And it's like, well, did the writer have, for instance, the villain saying or doing that thing? Because then maybe they didn't think that. But I do think that it's so funny that this song specifically is like, what is the message of this song? Damn, the Cotillion's got a lot of features. This thing slaps. And then you watch the music video and it's like, wait, is this about how technology will strip away our humanity? And it's like, well, maybe for these guys. Joke's on them. My Cotillion's great and not evil. So, like, again, it's kind of cool. Like, I guess somebody that I used to know is another, like you said, good indicator of that, where he puts forward two contrasting arguments and doesn't say which one is right.
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, but which of them does the writer want me to side with? Maybe just listen to the song and form your own opinion. And
Media literacy.
Yeah, because that is the thing. Because you can just be like, well, here's my opinion on it. The writer didn't pick it out for me. I made it myself. And I like that Gotye really does seem to feel like it's just his job to provide the story. It's not his job to police how people interpret it.
Yeah.
So that's cool. It's cool and I like it.
Yeah. I think this leads to, in my estimation, State of the Art is good because it is weird as hell.
Oh, yeah.
It is probably taking the biggest swings of the album in concept, in instrumentation, in composition, in its lyrics, and also its vocals, being the only one to use a whole ass vocoder on it, and exemplifies all of the things that make Making Mirrors so interesting, and Gotye himself so fascinating to listen to and to analyze. And again, goddamn, the final like instrumental blast is just lightning when it hits. When I was listening to this the first time, I was like, I'm gonna play Making Mirrors front to back. It's been like 4 or 5 years since I've listened to the whole thing. I don't know what prompted me to do this, but I was driving home from something one day and I'm like, I'm just gonna put it on. And I was like, oh man, like this is so good. Like somebody that I used to know is still that amazing. Wow, Smoke and Mirrors is like got this incredible groove to it, and when he just hits the such highs and lows in the chorus is like, oh man, that just kills it. And State of the Art was not my favorite when I was young, but when I got home, I parked, and State of the Art came on, and I was like, oh, whoa. And I just sat there listening to it, and like I shouted in like amazement when the final instrumental blast hit. I'm like, yes, yes, Gotye, this is incredible. I was just, I had the best musical experience I've had in years, just participating in this song. And at that moment, I like write it in my notes, like I've got to make a video on this at some point. And then a couple weeks later, I'm like, okay, no, I'm doing this now. But on a limb, I went back to this album, was like, yes, I want to give this another shot. I loved this when I was younger. What about it struck me so much? And I didn't know like any of this shit. I was just like, I like these songs. I didn't know about composition. I didn't know about sampling. I didn't know about anything.
Right.
It's like, man, something really struck me coming back and being able to analyze it like, oh no, this is in fact a masterpiece, which takes me to my conclusion. The State of the Art is his most artful song on a masterful album because it is his most Gotye song of Making Mirrors. So it's good music, Brent. I like it a lot. What can I say?
Yeah, I feel like I agree with that just because the points we've been making about like the composer, the artist just being like, what do I want to talk about? Like, forget the audience. If nobody else but me listens to this song, am I going to be happy? It's like, well, I really want to talk about how cool this Cotillion is.
Yeah.
And I really do respect that. Again, like, it really does seem like Gotye, in general, does not worry too much about, like, but what if nobody likes my music? He'll just, make the song he wants to make, which is, again, like, great. That's awesome. And it clearly worked super well for him. But this definitely feels like the song that has the least outside audience appeal. Because frankly, the people who listen to this song, statistically speaking, are never gonna even see this Cotillion in real life. Like, none of them are gonna be able to be like, oh my god, he's just like me, afar, afar. I also really liked the symphonizer feature. Wow! Like, everything else, all these songs are relatable on some level. They tell a story that you can sort of resonate with, even if you haven't directly experienced. Again, like 14 years old in 4th period math class, like, wow, you didn't have to cut me off. Make out like it never happened and that we were nothing. I don't know. There's something very interesting about all of that, because making art to be relatable or applicable in a wide context is one of the considerations when marketing is a consideration. Weirdly, we've talked about this when it comes to like merch designs.
Yeah.
Because when we do like shirt designs or pin designs, we always keep in mind like, yeah, we could do a design that's like a funny in-joke from the channel. But if it only makes sense in the context of you already know this joke, it's not going to do tremendously well. And like, we've seen that statistically, but it's like, oh,
we have a lot of merch. We see the stats on which ones work and which ones don't.
Yeah. And like the ones that consistently perform best are the ones that are funny even if you don't have context, or the ones that resonate for some other, like, I think the Extremely Human Person shirt design is still like one of our absolute best.
Yes.
And like, oh, that's a reference to a joke from the fucking Book of Invasions video about, like, all these fairies and FLOOF getting rewritten as humans for the sake of, like, a Christianized narrative. But you don't need that to think that wearing a shirt that says extremely human person on it is funny. And you don't need to have exactly experienced most of the things that Gotye has lived through to be like, wow, this song is so relatable. Except for this one. Like, you're not listening to this because it's a relatable experience. You're listening to this because you are listening to somebody gush about this cool thing.
Yeah.
There's something very meta here. Because
Yeah.
the song is gushing about the Cotillion. And I'm sitting here listening to you gush about the song gushing about the Cotillion.
Yeah.
And I'm also getting something out of this experience, even though I can't really relate to any step of the process.
Yeah. I think there is also something in here about the way Gotye constructs all of his music, and especially with this song, of if you try to find exactly what the audience wants and give it to them and try to chase virality, you will end up creating, like, less than bubblegum. It is a mirage of, like, cotton candy. It's so nothing. But if an artist creates something that means a lot to them, and it is constructed well, critical second part, an audience that has absolutely no basis in that thing whatsoever will still be able to get something out of it. I love this song so much. I don't think I will ever see a Lowry Cotillion Model D575 in person in my entire life.
No.
And yet, it works so well because he was all in on this idea of, I want to make a song just out of, or at least majority out of, the sounds from this synthesizer. F it. I'm going to make it about the synthesizer. Somebody stop me. And that, I think, is so potent of an idea. And he doesn't really call that much attention to it. It's just like, here's the music. But as an artist, being willing to say, here is my idea. Like, take it or don't. Like it or don't. I'm not going to try and pretend I know who you are and create a song to pull on the heartstrings of my audience of high school breakup havers for, like, this very, soulful, emotional song by Adele. It's like, I'm going to make a song about this thing that means something to me and put my whole ass into it. And in creating something that does not give a shit whether anyone else likes it, it becomes so much more enjoyable because there is so much to get invested in, because there is so much texture and meaning that is laid out in the construction of the composition and the lyrics and the way it pairs with the music video. I think there is something about art and the way that audiences interact with art that we can glean from this. And I hesitate to make too strong of a statement any particular way, but it does, on a couple different levels, come back to, like, Gotye was in this for the love of the game. This man adores music, and he blew up the world, and everyone loved him, and he was like, great, that was fun, you guys were awesome, I'm gonna go back and do my thing.
Yep.
And I respect the fuck out of that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely a shining example of, like, how to do art success right without losing track of who you are in the process. The polar opposite of all the various stories of the rock stars living fast and dying young is like, the alternative is Gotye. Or you could be this guy.
Or you can turn into a robot family on Mars because the Cotillion destroyed your house.
I have to say, that part got real scary.
Yeah.
You ever watch something and be like, if I'd seen this at age 5, I probably would have died?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Wouldn't go near a piano. The part where the genie arms turn into, like, lightning bolts.
Oh my god, they were genie arms. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the piano keys turn into, like, angry teeth.
When we started seeing the eyes go diamond-shaped, I was like,
Yeah.
oh no.
Yeah.
Weirdly, like, it was almost a relief when they came out as, like, a robot version of the family at the end, because for a while there, they were just the pipe organs attached to the back of the Cotillion with screaming human faces on them.
That was worse.
That was worse. At least they have legs by the end. Like, at least they could do shit.
Some autonomy. But
Yeah.
I'm sure there's more to talk about in this and the
for sure.
relationship with art and music, and why all of us need to have the Cotillion Model D575 with custom flute presets and Harmony Plus. But I think that's all we've got for this detailed diatribe today.
Damn.
I hope you all took something away from this and are running to your nearest record store to go sample the hit trumpet tunes of artist Francis Yip to make your next hit single.
Man.
But that's all I got. So until
real.
next time,
Bye.
bye.